My dear listeners, this is an original sci-fi story I wrote for you. If you'd like to support me, just subscribe to the channel, it really helps the growth. The memorial procession wound through the crystalline spires of Vethka Prime like a river of amber light and grief. Thousands of warriors lined the avenue in motionless columns, their bioluminescent crests dimmed to morning violet. Ceremonial hunting blades crossed over their broad thoraxes. At the center, a capsule of polished obsidian floated between magnetic cradles, silent, unhurried, impossibly small for the weight it carried. Who is in the capsule? A young Vethka asked, barely old enough to carry her first blade. Uruk, High Warden of the Northern Shoals, turned his great scaled head toward her. His 4 eyes softened. The human who saved our pups. Emma Jackson. 3 solar cycles ago, humanity had been little more than a curiosity in Vethka archives. A species so fragile their own gravity wore down their bones. So temperature-sensitive they built elaborate structures just to survive their planet's nights. The Vethka, apex predators of 6 star systems, regarded them with bemused detachment. Uruk had believed the same, until the creche station at Korathshol went dark. The station was a protected nursery complex orbiting a gas giant, housing 22 Vethka pups during their vulnerable first growth phase, ranging from newly hatched to 3 cycles old, the future of the clan. The emergency beacon lasted 9 seconds before a reactor cascade from a rogue mining drone silenced everything. Life support, communications, the seals on the pup enclosures. The nearest Vethka fleet was 11 hours away. The pups could not survive 11 hours without climate regulation. The only vessel in range was a human science shuttle, the Constantine, in sampling orbit 3,000 kilometers away. The station commander managed one burst transmission. Human vessel, do not approach. Radiation is beyond your shielding tolerances. You will not survive. There was a pause of 4 seconds. Then the human's voice, unhurried and almost gentle. How many children? 22 pups. But you cannot. I'm already moving. Talk me through the station layout. Her name was Emma Jackson, xenobiologist, 41 years old, solo on an 18-month research posting. Her shuttle was rated for scientific observation, not rescue. Uruk had listened to the flight recorder 1,000 times since. Her voice never cracked, though her biosensors told a different story. She docked manually on her 3rd attempt with the station rotating unpredictably on all axes. She said, "Okay, that worked." The interior was airless in sections, flooded with coolant in others, dark throughout. She moved through it using a schematic the commander had transmitted before losing consciousness. Inside the first enclosure, 12 pups clustered in the dark, the oldest barely able to walk. She said, "Hello, I know I look strange. You're going to be all right." She made 6 trips to the airlock she'd rigged as a staging area, 2 or 3 pups at a time. She was bitten 4 times. She patched each suit breach and kept moving, speaking to every pup in a low murmur the translation systems later confirmed was almost entirely nonsense. Simple sounds chosen for their calming rhythm. The second enclosure door had warped in the pressure differential. She spent 40 minutes cutting through the adjacent wall with a plasma torch not rated for the composite materials. Failed halfway through. She finished the cut with a hand tool meant for rock samples. She got all 10 out. The final enclosure held the youngest pups, newly hatched, needing regulated temperature. She wrapped each one in thermal insulation from her cargo panels and carried them against her body for warmth, trip after trip through airless corridors while her oxygen recycler ticked toward empty. The rescue fleet arrived 11 hours and 14 minutes after the initial signal. They found Emma Jackson seated in the airlock chamber, surrounded by 22 pups in varying states of sleep and wary alertness. Her oxygen reserves had been empty for 20 minutes. The chamber had a small residual atmosphere, enough to survive if one didn't move. She hadn't. She'd stayed still and let the pups sleep against her, conserving every molecule of air. She was unconscious when they found her. Radiation exposure. Hypothermia. For untreated puncture wounds. Oxygen deprivation. She survived. That had not been guaranteed. Uruk stood at her medical bay window for 3 hours, watching the healer machines work on this small, soft creature who had gone into the dark so that children would not die alone. He had fought 11 campaigns and lost warriors he loved. He had never felt anything quite like watching Emma Jackson breathe. When she recovered enough to speak, her first question was, "Are the pups okay?" He told her yes. She exhaled and closed her eyes. "Good. That's good." He asked her why she'd done it. She was quiet for a moment. "They were alone and scared and I was there. That's all it was. That's all it was." The simplicity undid him more than any elaborate answer could have. Emma Jackson died 14 months later, not from her injuries, but in a transport accident. The universe had saved her from the station and then taken her carelessly, as it sometimes did. The Vethka did not forget. The procession reached the Hall of the Remembered, the most sacred site on Vethka Prime. Quiet, tense voices moved through the crowd. No non-Vethka had ever been brought here. Uruk had known his decision would be contested. He had not changed it. The 22 pups she had saved stood at the front of the assembly, young adults now, their first hunting crests grown. Alongside their clan markings they wore a human symbol, a small loop of braided cord, copied from an equipment tether Emma had tied for a pup who wouldn't stop crying. The pup had kept it, told the others, and it had become something they all carried. As the capsule was lowered into its place of honor, Uruk spoke the words Vethka had spoken for their greatest for 1,000 generations. "Here lies a warrior who did not know the word impossible applied to her. Here lies one who counted strangers' children as her own. Here lies one who faced death not in battle, but in the cold and the dark, alone, for the sake of young ones who did not know her name." He placed his palm against the stone. "Here lies Emma Jackson, human, scientist, keeper of our pups." The 22 began the morning honor song, the resonant Vethka harmony that had sent the great dead into memory for 10,000 years. They sang it now for a human woman who had held their lives against her body until help came. As the last note faded, a young warrior approached. "High Warden, why do you place an alien above our own people in this hall?" Uruk watched the 22 move past the capsule, each pressing a palm to the stone in the gesture of filial reverence, given to fallen parents. "We thought we understood courage," he said at last. "We measure strength by fang and claw and endurance." But she was afraid every moment. Her own body told us so in the records. Her hands were shaking when she docked. She went anyway, because children were alone in the dark. He looked at the young warrior. "We had no word for that kind of strength. We do now." The young warrior looked at the 22. Alive, grown, futures that had no right to exist and did anyway. "Who is in the capsule?" she asked, not because she didn't know, but because she finally understood why it mattered. Uruk's crest brightened. The Vethka expression of profound, grieving pride. The human who saved our pups. The human who was afraid and went anyway. The human who stayed still in the dark so the children could breathe. And in the Hall of the Remembered, in letters of deep gold beside the names of warriors who had shaped a civilization, the stonemasons carved a human name. Emma Jackson. Below it 3 words. She stayed anyway.